All right, we're going to be talking defense coming up with coordinator Steve Wilks and former Jets receiver Quincy Enunwa.
We beat anybody in the world, and I think we're going to win next Sunday.
Picked off, Aaron Glenn, jumbled and caught, Jumbo Elliott, one-handed catch, Chris Paul gets running loose, Reeves, can't wait.
Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride.
Game day and every day, score a jewelry touchdown with Kendra Scott. Shop fashion and find jewelry fit for another winning season at your local store or kendrascott.com. When you got the call from AG about the defensive coordinator vacancy here, what was your reaction?
I was excited. AG and I was in communication for a while throughout the process. And so he kept me in the loop in exactly what was going on. And when it narrowed down to the Jets, I got real excited because I understand the personnel that we have here. I was excited about the guys that we have on defense, a lot of pieces to work with. So, and I knew his relationship with the organization that it was going to be a great fit with ownership.
Where did your paths cross before this?
Really, we never worked together. A lot of tremendous respect for one another. We're in the same division. When he was with the Saints, I was with the Panthers. So as DB guys, we were always communicate and talk, particularly when we got to the combine. We were always fellowship there every year. And I think we just developed a relationship to where our philosophies and ideas were aligned with one another.
Yeah, can you speak to that, your philosophies as far as defensive football and attacking the offense?
Well, one, just, being aggressive through our base fundamentals, number one, starting with that. Having guys on the perimeter that can cover and play man-to-man, just our identity, how the defense should be shaped. Everything starts up front with really an aggressive mentality, So just those conversations over the years, man, we just, realize that we're on the same page.
The last game you coached in the National Football League was the Super Bowl. What was the year away like for you? And can you speak to how the fire still burns after 30-plus years of experience coaching?
It was great, man. It was an opportunity for me to really reset, recharge. I was over at UNC Charlotte, which was right there at home, so it was very convenient for me. Coach Biff Poggi was outstanding, to invite me over. We built a great friendship, and they practiced in the morning. So, Rich, really all afternoon, I would just watch tape. And I had every game from the NFL each week. So I would study different, teams, different defenses. I watched a lot of Detroit and what they were doing, but just different things throughout the year, what they were doing on third down and what the, schematics were. So was able to progress and grow there and was excited to get the phone call to get back into the fold.
Is this a fair assessment of the way you go about it? You are an aggressive play caller who is a guy who's going to emphasize takeaways at every turn.
That's my foundation. And when I came in the league with Lovie Smith, it was just really with Chicago, taking the football away, with Peanut Tillman, the Peanut Punch, Chris Harris, who's on the staff right now as the secondary coach, pass game coordinator. He was another guy on that team that believed in really stripping and taking the ball away. And everywhere I've been, that's always been our mantra, So that's something that we're going to continue to coach and emphasize here. I'm all about the fundamentals and technique. Coach AG talks about it all the time. It's not about our scheme. It's about our play style. And that's the one thing that we want to continue to emphasize, being physical, being smart, all right, and understanding how to finish, not only on the field, all right, but even in the building.
How do you go about connecting to players?
I think that's always been my strong suit is anything in life, I believe, is about building relationships and having a understanding that there's life beyond football. And when you can sit here and cultivate those relationships with your players, I think it's easier to be able to coach them on the field. I said this back years ago with Josh Norman when he left us in Carolina. He went to Washington, and people said, man, he was never really the same player. And I said, it's easy to develop the player when you're taking time to develop the person. And that's what I did with him in Carolina. We built that relationship, so it was easy for me to coach him and teach him on the field.
AG said the first thing when I asked him about you was straight shooter.
Yeah. That's what I believe in. And I believe in telling someone exactly what they need to hear. I think that's so important. We talk about all the time, we want to act like a champion, and that's accountability, commitment, and trust. And that's what I'm trying to build with the team, and that's what I want to be able to get back from them. And I'm always telling them the truth. Sometimes they may not like it, but I think they're respected in the end. And I tell coaches all the time, we have to have grown men conversations. We can't shy away from things that we need to address. And I think that's so important. And that's where we are right now, with phase 3, talking about some of the discipline stuff, being consistent in how we operate on a day-to-day basis. And the guys are completely buying in, which I appreciate.
You've been a head coach in the National Football League. How can that experience help you with Aaron, who is an accomplished coach himself, but this is his first time as a head coach in the National Football League?
I think it's just always trying to draw on past experiences when things come up, and a lot of those aren't really related to football. So having an ear that someone who's gone through it and can really understand the situation that he's sitting in that seat. So I think that's so important to have that outlet and have that guy. Because sometimes in that seat, man, you feel like there's no one you can talk to because you're really dealing with different things way beyond football. So I think, I can be a sounding board for him in regards to that.
Can you speak to the importance of the assistants on your staff? The assistant coaches on your defensive staff?
Man, the assistant coaches are so huge. And I've said this for years. Like, the head coach delivers the message. He sets the foundation, and it's our responsibility as coordinators and assistant coaches to echo that. And I try to do the same thing as soon as I leave the team meeting, emphasizing the stuff that we talked about as a staff. And then now as assistant coaches, they have really the most influence because they're around their guys. Once they go into those private, individual rooms, it's about, the presentation and how you teach it, how you present it. And guys, man, are phenomenal. I bounce around to each room. We got great teaching. That's one of the things I truly believe in as coaches, great teachers, outstanding communicators, and guys that can develop players.
Speaking of players, what is it going to be like for some of these guys who are playing for a Steve Wilks defense in the secondary? Because you mentioned Chris Harris before. Dre Bly is here as well. Also, the head coach played in the National Football League for 15 years himself, was a position coach before he became defensive coordinator, and now is at the top of he's at the top of the ladder.
Well, I always say this, right? Everything we do starts up front. I mean, I don't care what it is. We have to do a great job of establishing the line of scrimmage, right? Stopping the run. The second level right there, I call, Quincy and Sherwood right there. They're the glue, And then on the back end, I emphasize we drive the bus from the back. The last line of defense. All right, we can't make a mistake back there. And our communication thus far throughout the process has been phenomenal. We're building on that each and every day. When you look at Cisco, you look at Brandon Stevens, the guys that we picked up, man, we've really got some great guys in free agency. I'm excited about Malachi, the guys that we drafted. I think Coach AG and Darren Muji has done a tremendous job, the whole scouting department, in really nailing the draft. So our secondary, man, fundamentally sound. All right, aggressive in how we, approach each and every day. I think the identity of your defense is how your DBs tackle. All right, we're going to be physical on the back end. They block support and they say one-on-one right now. That running back and you're a DB, and I tell those guys all the time, we better show up. That's our mentality right here. And as you mentioned earlier, man, it's about making plays on the ball and taking the ball away.
What did you know about Sherwood before you got here, and why was that an important re-signing for this defense and the entire team?
Well, really, man, you go back and I'm hoping, and I don't like comparing, right? But when I look at Sherwood and I really look at Quincy, man, I go back over my tenure and, Thomas and Luke, Fred Warner and Greenlaw a few years ago, they have that ability, for us playing together and being here in the off season and building that foundation is great. Sherwood was really, at that point, management, AG decided to move on with Mosley. And I thought, Sherwood, is your time to step up in that room and be that leader, not only in that room, but on that side of the defense, and I can't tell you how pleased and excited I am in the leadership role that he's taken, and you see that, a guy that just got paid, and it's like he's still hungry. He's still hungry, and he's still trying to make sure that he does everything he can to help this defense.
What do you think about some of the pieces up front, starting with a cornerstone defensive tackle in Quinnen Williams?
Man, I love Quinnen. Love him. He's phenomenal. This guy is one of the top D tackles in the NFL. When you look at other guys we brought in, Cowan, Byron, Jay, he is phenomenal. He's quick off his feet, quick off the ball. I think those guys are really going to complement Quinnen. And when you look outside and what we have with Will, Jermaine, Clem, and I'm excited about Tyler Barron, one of the guys that we drafted right here. So all those guys are looking good in their progression and moving in the right direction.
All right, lastly, Sauce Gardner, you mentioned your expectations for the secondary as a whole. What has coaching Sauce been like in the early going, and what is your expectation going to be from him as you get to these next stages? Because right now you're instilling the system, you're out here in the spring, and training camp is on the horizon.
The first thing I would say about him, smart. He is tremendously smart, understands the game, sees it through a different lens, which is great. Our dialogue and communication is like I'm talking to one of the coaches and how I present things to him. Formation, splits, IDing certain guys, aligning at different positions, therefore he can play fast. The system, as we implement and install different things, I think he's picking it up great. We're challenging him right now to be consistent, in his technique and his approach. He can be consistently one of the top players in this league, as we already know. I'm talking about, a big time, corner, as we had one here years ago for his Revis. He has that kind of potential and ability. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do this year.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Get ready for all the action and energy of Jets game day this season with 2025 season tickets. Lock in your seats to be there for every snap of exciting matchups at MetLife Stadium at nyjets.com/season tickets. Q. Aaron Glenn takes over here with the Jets. Of course, defensive coordinator the last 4 seasons in Detroit. They flipped that thing. He makes a very important hire, I thought, early on. Steve Wilks, defensive coordinator for him. Wilks is going to be calling plays, and also he brings that head coaching acumen to the table, so he'll be able to help AG out throughout the season.
Yeah, and one thing I love about this defense is that all the coaches, well, for the most part, are former players, right? So that's a different, you're talking about, guys that have been in the game, understand it. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, how that relays onto the players, because this is going to be a defense that's bringing back some guys that obviously are really talented in Sauce and Quinnen, right? MC2 didn't have a great year last year. He was coming off an injury, so now we get to see him really come back and play well. So, I'm excited to see, how this kind of shapes up.
I think people are sleeping on the Jets defensively a little bit because you just mentioned it. They do have elite players at every level. If you're really talking about, you go to the secondary and you have the Sauce Gardner, then you go up a couple levels and you have that cornerstone piece, the defensive tackle with Quinnen Williams. Then at the linebacker position, that tandem with Sherwood and Quincy Williams is dynamic.
Definitely. I mean, listen, I think the question marks are understandable, right? Especially coming off of last year. So it makes sense that people are like, are they going to be good this year? You still have another question mark. DJ Reed, you lose a guy like that, you hope that the guy on the opposite side and Brandon Stevens can kind of pick up that slack or even do even more. Safety position was obviously a question mark. Cisco, last year wasn't his best year, but prior to that, he was a great safety. So, I say this all the time now that, AG really wants his coaches to be able to coach, right, to be able to really get the most out of his guys.
Let me read you some stats from last year. The Jets were 3rd in NFL yards per game, 313.8. 17th in rush yards per game allowed, 121.1. But 6th in rush yards per play at just a little over 4.0. It's close to 4.1. Interception rate, that's been a problem for a little bit around here. 27th in the National Football League, 1.34%, where his sacks per pass attempt, they wanted to get to the quarterback, was 7th. 17th in the red zone, so about 58.73.
Yeah.
So in Detroit, the emphasis for Aaron Glenn was stop the run and take the football away.
Right.
That's going to be the same deal here.
Oh, absolutely. And, it'll be – I think if they can make Brandon Stevens and Sauce Gardner 2 guys that take the football away, I mean, that's going to change the course of all the season, right? Because a guy like Brandon Stevens, I think to be honest with you, in my opinion, he was in a lot of plays. He just wasn't always able to track the ball. And I heard Steve Wilks also say this himself, that, one thing they want to work on with him is trying to find the ball a little bit better, figuring out how to play the game like a receiver, So it'll be good for them to get him on that track. And then Sauce is a guy that we've been wanting him to get picks, since he got here. So I think you're just kind of having a different view this year, and having a guy like AG that's played the game is going to be helpful. And Dre Bly.
The Jets had 7 interceptions last season. That was tied for 26. I mean, they got to get the ball more.
Yeah.
And 5 of those picks were from guys who are no longer on the roster.
Right.
You just mentioned Stevens being around the ball. The Gardner dynamic is very interesting because a lot of teams, opposing quarterbacks, are like, oh, Gardner's over there, I'm staying away from him. So how does he get more picks? How do the Jets schematically put him in a position where he'll have more opportunities to make plays on the ball?
Well, so to be honest with you, I think that there might be a little bit of a shift this year. I think that I don't think teams believe that they can beat Sauce, right? But I still think that there's going to be a little bit more challenging him, right? You think about like Tennessee last year, they challenged him. There were a couple other teams that challenged him. You got to have a quarterback that's confident in himself, or just kind of silly, makes it, decisions that you don't really agree with. But, I think it's going to be up to the teams to say, listen, my receiver might not be able to get open, but can he catch the ball on Sauce? Because right now, Sauce doesn't show that he's going to get the turnover. And so maybe I'll take the incompletion, right? Or I'll take the jump ball and give my guy an opportunity. So I think this year he might have more times where teams will throw at him, especially if we're playing some receivers that, these teams have confidence in.
What do you see from him in terms of how can he come down with it?
It's tough. I think he's usually in position, and I think a lot of times he doesn't take he doesn't get a lot of opportunities. Let's start there.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
He doesn't get a lot of opportunities. But then the other part of it is, when he does get those opportunities, he's not always in the right position. And so then that makes it also kind of challenging. So, I think as a cornerback, you're on an island, right? And so you have to keep yourself in the game as much as possible. And there were some decisions that were made, whether it was his fault or safety fault, that kind of made it where he couldn't get those interceptions.
I like the Cisco dynamic, and I wrote about this the other day, that him and Sauce are really big. Now, Cisco's playing the ball hawking safety spot, but I think having him on one side is going to allow Cisco to be what he is, a natural ball hawk, and take some chances on it.
Right. Yeah, definitely. When you have that confidence on the other side, I think any safety is going to tell you, like, okay, I don't have to look at that side. I remember who was it that played safety before, but they were speaking on Revis and how, I don't really have to pay attention to that side as much, right? I can be rangy on this side,
right.
And it allows me to make plays when I need to.
What do you make of the other safety spot? You got Tony Adams. Isaiah Oliver is the kind of guy who can do it all.
Right.
Like, he can play nickel for you. He can play safety. Then you have Malachi Moore, a player the Jets are very high on. And I asked Cisco about him. He said, I really like his game. Yeah,
it's going to be a good challenge. And I think, Tony Adams coming back, he's the guy right now, right? So he's got the target on his back, right? He's the guy that's got the most experience right now in terms of, this is my team. So, it's going to be interesting to see who the team likes, because ultimately sometimes it's scheme fit. It's not always like, are you the better players? Do you fit the scheme the best?
Yeah, and the Jets definitely think that Malachi Moore fits that scheme because they traded up in order to get him. You had Aaron Glenn talking to Branch about him, and he said he's the dog.
Right.
This guy can do it all. He brings it from a cerebral perspective. He's also a physical dude who's not afraid to get
Bama
dirty.
safety.
Yeah, that's right. So we were talking before we started the pod. What's it going to look like in the defensive interior next to Quinnen Williams? Because you sign in free agency Derek Nottie, who most recently played with the Chiefs, Byron Cowart, who not only played with the Bears last year, but the Bears' defensive coordinator at the end of the season was Eric Washington. Eric Washington is the Jets' defensive line coach. You got Mathis. You picked him up on waivers. He's a monster of a guy. The previous regime picked him up last December. Leonard Taylor's still here. You also signed Jay Tufele in free agency.
Yeah, I mean I think that's one position where I wasn't sure whether or not they was going to try to draft somebody.
Yep.
So I think
everybody was wondering that because of the depth of the class, right?
Yeah, exactly. You had a lot of great talent in the draft. So I think that if they decided not to pick anybody up, then I think you have to assume that they feel really confident about these guys. And this is a position that's one of the most important. It's like the offensive line on the opposite side, right? They got to get the pressure right. They got to make it where it's really challenging. So then the corners can play free. When they know that there's getting a lot of pressure from their interior and the outside, now I can play with a little bit more leniency.
I wonder if Cowart is a slight favorite going in. But again, you're going to split reps up. You're going to be rotating guys. It's not like any of these guys, even if they won the job, is going to be playing 70 snaps.
Well, yeah, I think there is a understanding that if a coach brings a guy that he's going to like him a little bit more. But what I will say, though, is that a lot of times some guys fall into that trap and think, well, I know the coach and I got a personal relationship with him. Like, it's set for me. So, as a player, you got to be careful thinking that way. And, as a young guy, if you see that, you just got to play hard and, find your time.
What do you make of Will McDonald, who played about 235, 236 last year, putting on 15 pounds of muscle in all season?
No, that's deep. I mean, I think for him, I'm looking forward to seeing how he improves on last year, right? It was exciting to see Jermaine Johnson make the step, and it was even more exciting to see Will McDonald because I think he was doubted even more, especially on his size. So to come out and get those sacks like he did, I can't wait to see what he does with more weight on him, right? In a new defense, so that's going to be him and Jermaine Johnson together, given that Jermaine comes back healthy, is going to be exciting.
10.5 sacks last year. What do you make of the number change for Will going to number 9? You like that?
I mean, sometimes you got to go back to your roots, Yeah, you got to go back to your roots. And maybe that'll kind of bring the game is mental. A lot of it is mental. So if you can kind of put yourself back in that mind space where you were the most confident, there's a reason why you were drafted at the position you were, then maybe it'll really take you to another level.
And Will's going to help Armand Membu going to another level. And we're going to be able to watch that throughout training camp. Those guys with the pads on going toe-to-toe. You mentioned Jermaine before. Coming off the Achilles, that was a devastating injury for the defense. That happened in week 2 last year. His mindset is unbelievable. And he provides an element of nastiness, and he plays the game so passionately. And he's got a pretty unique skill set, as AG said, because he's athletic, but he also can set that edge, and he's a big dude. What do you think about him during camp? Because AG's been clear about that. Hey, he might start camp on the PUP list, but he'll be ready in week 1, and he'll be teeing off trying to get Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen now over the past few years a couple guys on this team with Achilles. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers. Then you have AVT as well. So AVT was able to come back and play, right? And so those young guys have a better opportunity to bounce back. I think AVT was a little bit more protected being an interior guy, whereas, a guy like Jermaine Johnson, he's more out on the edge. There's no real protection, so to say. But, I think it'll be up to him. It sounds like he's working hard, right? The guy is documenting his recovery process, and so whether it's PUP or right on active as soon as he gets back, I think he's going to be hungry.
Rashad Weaver, he played pretty well this spring. He was popping. Again, no pads out there, and the quarterbacks are protected. He had 5.5 sacks with the Titans back in 2022, so we're not far removed from that. And the Jets also drafted Tyler Barron out of Miami late, so we'll have to see what he can do in camp. Getting back to the cornerback position, when you talked about Stevens, Michael Carter, what about A.Z. Thomas?
Yeah.
The physicality he brings to the table and also the size, because this has been an emphasis here for these guys. Like AG, who played at 5'9", said, hey, I want my cornerbacks big.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, I think that's. I like that pick. When I watch his film, he's a real physical guy, real lanky guy, right? A guy that will keep you right in front of you, and that disrupts timing, right? Like a lot of times we always make fun of DBs whenever they, there's an incompletion, the ball's thrown way out of the way, and they do this like as if they made a big play. But ultimately, the offensive side is all about timing. So if you can disrupt that timing, you can really disrupt the whole play. So you're going to have those opportunities to celebrate. And so if he can do that, and I think that's what they're looking for him to do. I remember on his phone call at the draft, they told him to be nasty or something like that. Really be. So yeah, that's what they want him to be.
And then a couple other guys who are going to try to make inroads here is JBC, Jarek Bernard Converse, who I thought had a good camp last year, and then Quantez Stiggers. We should not forget about him as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a guy that can also play special teams. He did a little bit of it last year. But, yeah, another physical corner. So that's where they're going. That's the type of guy that they're looking for. So, it'll be good to kind of watch that battle.
All right, before we get to Steve Wilks, what about the marrying of philosophies? You mentioned it before. You got Aaron Glenn, who might have operated or called it a little bit differently than Wilks. What do you think when you put their heads together and what we're ultimately going to see?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a good marriage of the two defenses, right? And I think there's going to be a lot of similarities, right? And so for the terminology would be the toughest thing, coming from one defense to now this a new one. But I think it's going to still be aggressive. I think they're still going to find ways to make plays and find ways to make it cohesive.
Yeah. And again, stopping the run, taking the football away. And these are two things that you go back. Wilks has had tremendous success getting to the quarterback, and we saw that from Detroit as far as their rise is concerned. Obviously, you draft Hutchinson, and that changed the dynamic. But AG stayed true to what he wanted.
Even with the injuries.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Like last year, it was impressive what Aaron did last year in Detroit. So I ultimately think defensively could be very much, the Jets could be very much helped by what's going to happen on offense, because I think in an ideal situation, the Jets are holding on to the ball because they're grinding on teams with the run game. They're pounding the rock. That means time of possession. That means the guys are not on the field as much, because you're going from a philosophy offensively to, hey, we're going to throw the ball a lot, to more balance. And when you have more balance, I think ultimately it's going to help the guys on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, balance is the key word there, because last year there wasn't a lot of balance, offense, defense, or special teams. So I think that's what they're looking for this year.
Game day and every day, score a jewelry touchdown with Kendra Scott. Shop fashion and find jewelry fit for another winning season at your local store or kendrascott.com. Shine bright, do good with Kendra Scott. All right, it's time for my extra point. Aaron Glenn and Steve Wilks are going to challenge this Jets defense, which has Pro Bowlers at every level, to find another gear. We know the Jets will field a very fast unit, and that is something you can't coach. Glenn and Wilks are going to demand that they have a good tackling group who takes the ball away. Elite defenses pillage, and we're going to hear more about play style than playbook. My defensive takeaway is the Jets are going to amass more takeaways in 2025. So long, until next time.